Hello and welcome to this interview on TomBecka.com, where everyone's extraordinary and everyone has a story to tell. And this story is a story that a lot of people are dealing with, but very few people are willing to tell this story. This is the story of a soldier coming back from 3 tours in Iraq who is dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I don't know how many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of soldiers have come back and are dealing with this, but I do know that it's an issue that many, many, many people who are coming back from military service have to battle, and I think maybe sometimes they think they're battling alone. Ben is a brave man. He's a brave man, not only for his military service, but also for the fact that he's willing to come on this interview and be very honest and open and willing to express just what he's going through. It's not whiny. He's not complaining. He's not saying, oh, poor, poor, poor me. He's just trying to explain what he's feeling, what he's going through. And his life is the life of so many others who have gone and fought for this country, and people that I think many times we just forget about. Yeah, the war is not on the front page of the news. It's over in Iraq, so why even think about it? Well, the war is not over for a lot of people when they come back, and that's why I did this interview. Now, I must tell you with this interview, I messed up. The recording on this interview was very, very poor. I used the wrong equipment. I wasn't paying attention, and the quality on this interview, quite honestly, is bad. But much like the early days of rock and roll, where they didn't have the technology and the quality of some of the old, Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly records and that is bad technology, especially compared to what we have today. The energy, the honesty comes through the speakers for a great experience. And I think that's what this interview is. I thought about bringing Ben back in and re-recording the interview, but I was afraid it wouldn't be as genuine. When I got done talking to Ben and I shook his hand was wet with sweat because he was so nervous about getting up here and actually talking about this and bearing his soul the way he did. So I figured that instead of bringing Ben back and recording with the proper technology, I would run this interview as it is. And I think that it's so genuine, so real, that 30 seconds into it, you're going to forget about the sound quality and be so engaged in the story of this brave man. So with my apologies to Ben for my poor performance during the recording, I thank him for his time, and I hope you enjoy this interview on TomBecka.com. You're battling some demons, aren't you?
Yeah, I've got a pretty rich history for my 30 years of life. The last 12 years has taken some really interesting turns, but yeah, you see me on the street, you wouldn't pick me apart from anybody else, I don't think.
Tell me about that rich history. What are we talking about here?
Well, normal to start off with up until age 18, and then went down to University of Nebraska at Lincoln for my first semester of college, and 11 days after my 18th birthday, so I turned August 31st, was 9/11, 2001. And right after that, I called the Marine recruiter and signed up and joined the Marines. And by January of 2002, I was off to boot camp in California.
So you're just a kid starting out college, all right, and thinking everything, your whole life planned out. All of a sudden, 9/11 happens, and you say, I got to go fight for my country, and you sign up.
Yeah, that was one of those moments, I think, where I'd always been the report cards that my parents always got was we love Ben so much, but oh my God, is he a pain in the ass to have in the classroom, because I'm just a talker and I love people, and that's who I am. But I wasn't really doing anything noteworthy, and really hadn't in my life up until that point. I was a very average, if not slightly below average student. I ran track my senior year just to get something under my belt to tell my kids when I'm older. But when 9/11 happened, that was a moment where I realized it was a gut check moment where you go, okay, this is one of those times where I don't know what's ahead of me. I know what's behind me, and I have an opportunity to have an impact on what's coming. And so I just thought, if my wife was working in that building, or my mother, or my children were at daycare in that building, I can't sit here now doing nothing, drinking, being a stupid 18-year-old college student, knowing that there's something that I could have done down the road, because that could have been, in the future, my wife, my children. And that really was that. I just thought my thought was not on my watch.
And you went boot camp, and did you fight in Afghanistan, Iraq? Where were you?
I joined to go to Afghanistan, but by the time that I got done with all of my training, it was August, and that was already, we were making the pivot to Iraq. And so I was training up, and by January of 2003, I was flying over to Kuwait with half the Marine Corps and half the Army to invade Iraq.
Okay, so you were part of the initial invasion then.
Yep, 2003 initial invasion from Kuwait all the way up to Baghdad.
Now, you start off going into this Afghanistan, going after Al-Qaeda, thinking, okay, red, white, and blue, America, I've got to do my thing for my country.
Right.
And now you're going into Iraq. Did that have any effect on you, or was it still all the same emotion?
At the time, no. Because when I can speak for myself. When I joined the military, you know that you sign on the dotted line. You understand that those 4 years are no longer yours when you sign that contract. And at that point, the politics of it really is a moot point. Because you're going to go where you're told to go, and you can like it, you can not like it, but you damn sure better make the best of it, because your life depends on it, and so do other people. So the whole political, we monitored it just because you're wondering, where am I going to go?
Yeah.
But aside from that, you just focus on your training, and you spend so much time training and preparing for war, oddly enough, you don't even know or even care where the war is you're going to.
Was that the general mood of everybody else on that plane, or were there people grumbling saying, hey, I fought for Afghanistan, I signed up for Afghanistan?
Not at all.
Not Iraq. It was
now,
all...
Later, I'll tell you, because I spent 8 years on active duty, I did 3 tours in total to Iraq. So the first, the invasion, we're going, okay, and you remember what it's like. People who, it was like, right now, think of Syria, UN inspectors in Syria checking for chemical weapons, all that, it's like, you can feel that energy mounting for justification to send troops or bombs or any number of things into Syria. This is the same thing that happened in Iraq, 11 years ago, or however long ago it was now, 2003, so 10 years ago. It's the same thing. So we don't know. All you know is what the quote-unquote reliable sources can tell you. And but me, I was PFC Wormington, Private First Class Wormington. My job is to run that way.
Yeah,
I'll point, you run.
Right, yeah. Do it, you say, and you're happy to do it.
Absolutely.
Now you come back now, and you're battling post-traumatic stress disorder. After serving 3 tours, you're battling post-traumatic stress disorder. In hindsight, with going what you're going through, was all of that worth it? Would you do it again?
Absolutely.
You would?
Yep, without it. Because here's the deal, Tom. The residuals of... Okay, here's a way to look at it. What I did had an impact, a global impact. Not to say that me specifically, but I was part of something that had a global impact. And when you have a global impact, there's going to be reverberations for a long time to come in a lot of different ways. On the global scale, but also on the personal scale, that impact reverberated in me in a lot of ways. Some of them are very positive, and some of them can be perceived as being very negative. And I think from the outward in, we hear PTSD, this post-traumatic stress disorder, but the reality is it's only a disorder in America. It's not a disorder in Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria or Israel or any number of places where a healthy fear of survival is a pretty good quality to have, or fear of death, I should say. And so it's when you're transplanted back into this cushiony, comfortable, superficial day-to-day, that's where the shift that your brain went through from all that combat really has trouble settling in.
So, in effect, what you're saying, in America, you've got post-traumatic stress disorder. People that are living in Iraq, that's just called life.
It's called order. That's their order. It's life. It's acceptance. You accept that I could walk down the road with, walking my son to school with our 3 goats, and boom, IED goes off, and my son's maimed, and I'm I've lost my vision. And now for the rest of my life, and they don't have, over there, they don't have like, oh, I'm going to sue my government now because this happened to me. Mm-hmm. Whereas if something like that happened here, it's like, oh, we have someone to point at. But over there, existence is just it. It's on you. And so it's a very interesting dynamic, and that's why I'm so lucky that I had the opportunity to travel outside of America, to travel outside and see what the rest of the world lives with on a daily basis, what their normal is.
Now, I want to be a devil's advocate here, okay? Yeah. I want to be devil's advocate. Now, but people listening to this are thinking the same thing. Some at least are.
Yeah.
All right, dude, you saw how bad it is other places. You know how good you got it here. There's this PTSD thing you're talking about. Get over it, man. Come on, you know. Get back. You're married now. You got a wife. You got a family. Right. You're starting. Come on, get over it. Yeah. As opposed to, talking about, well, I'm dealing with this post-traumatic stress.
Sure. So, one word, Nico Jenkins. For those who aren't in Omaha, Nico Jenkins is this guy who's just been locked up. He was released from prison here in Omaha, and he went on a random shooting spree, killed 4 people within 10 days, right? The police said that what's so crazy about this murder spree is that he crossed racial boundaries, gender boundaries, and locational norms, which is very uncommon for a killer. The last person who died, this Andrea Kruger, died on 168th and 4th Street. She was shot in the head, killed execution style in the street. This is 100 yards from my house. So, what I have to say to you all, the royal you, is you're not safe. The world is a dangerous place. But I agree that this heightened level of awareness that we have, or that I have, is not necessary. But the brain has a very difficult time closing its eyes to the monsters in the room once it's seen them. So when I come home, you can tell me all you want, there's no monster under the bed. But at one point, I crawled under the bed for 8 years and fought the monsters. So you can't, I'm sorry, but you just can't tell me that.
You can't unring the bell.
You can't unring the bell. The way I try and describe it is, if you turn, you live your entire life in the darkness, and you turn the light on, and now you see those monsters in the room. Turn the light off. Are you more scared now? Now that you know they exist and you can't see them? Because we're all in the same room here. And so the job is now for the veterans coming home, and don't get me wrong, I'm not asking for anything. You're not out here saying, "Oh, poor me."
No, you're just saying,
no.
You're just trying to deal with the stress that you had in Iraq, so that you can maybe not think of those monsters all the time.
I'm an investment advisor. I have a day job. I got a bachelor's degree from UNO, graduated summa cum laude. So now, because of my time in the service, I've got, I just have a different brain. And like I said, a lot of that is very, very good. And it made me so much of a better person. And I would include the post-traumatic stress in there because there's a lyric in a song that I used to love, and it says, "Every scar is a bridge to someone else's heart." And when we go through these things, I could sit here very easily and try and play the poor me card, but that's not in my DNA. That's been beat out of me in the Marines. Mm-hmm. It used to be, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But now I go and I help at Bellevue University, the Veterans Initiative for Advancement. I talk to veterans there. I talk with veterans through Lutheran Family Services. I'm on the board of directors for HETRA, trying to help veterans transition and go through these issues. So my job, I don't really care what the public opinion is of post-traumatic stress. I really don't, because the people who, it's just a simple fact, is I'm not going to waste time. There's people who are dealing with these things on a daily basis who are agoraphobic to the point that they can't set foot outside their house because they haven't learned how to dim the light down once it's been flipped on.
Yeah, why do you think that you've been able to deal with this? In other words, you're right. There are some people that are dealing with it to such a point they can't hold a job, can't have a relationship,
Right.
and that. And you've been able to, like you say, have a, get married and have a job and work with others.
Uh-huh.
What do you think? I mean, is there something that you could teach them to get them to be more like you?
Well, I was near suicide at a point. I have a whole sleeve of tattoos on my arm that really represents the time period that I went through where I realized that you could quit or you can go. Things became very black and white because the PTSD and all the stuff that we go through and anything else in life, we can tend to get really caught up in the gray, but you really just have to make a decision. Am I going to move forward and forget, just say, well, whatever it is, whatever baggage I'm carrying is what I'm carrying. But we have to at some point forget about the weight of it and make a decision to just move forward. Mm-hmm. And that's what I went through, and it was 2006 where I had just moved. So, 2003 I went to Iraq. 2004 I went back to Iraq. So those were 2 7-month tours. And then I had about a year and a half before I re-enlisted and moved down to San Diego from my base, which is in the high Mojave Desert of California, so just north of Palm Springs. So I moved down to San Diego, and I thought, okay, this is really great. I just spent the last 4 years completely immersed in this Marine world. But what I need to do now, knowing that someday I won't be surrounded by this cocoon of people who have these common, that I moved in with civilian roommates. I lived out on town in San Diego. I worked on base. I had my Marine day job, and the rest of it was just me trying to be a civilian. Well, that's where I really started having struggles.
Because the people that didn't go through what you went through couldn't relate to you, and you couldn't relate to them.
Right. In the ways that I did relate to them, I just didn't find it very, I don't know what the word is, inspiring. Very uninspiring was what I had seen versus for many years of watching very average, normal, if not below, some people very below average, because there's a whole mix of people. Uh-huh. We may have this idea of a 6'3", square-jawed, Marine fighting the battle, but the reality is, like, I'm 5'9", was 135 when I went in, Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, they're just kids. They're 18, 19-year-old kids. And watching them do the things that they did, and then seeing what a parallel it is between, because the moral, I think, from the top down when we went into Iraq was the best thing you can do, America, for these troops is to keep shopping.
Yeah.
You remember,
that was it. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
keep shopping.
No, we on stage side during all this, we've made no sacrifices. The economy might have tanked a little bit, but we've made no real sacrifices.
Which is fun. It is what it is. The way I look at it is, we all serve in one way or another. And just because you're wearing a uniform doesn't mean you're not a servant or upholding your civil obligations to our government, because everybody can't serve at one time. So some people need to work and keep the economy going and feed their family, and I don't know, it's just...
Well, let me ask you this. Now, you and I, we're having a conversation about this, but I would guess that with most people, they don't get in depth and ask you like these questions. My guess would be that you meet somebody and you start talking and you come up that you fought in Iraq, you fought in Afghanistan. Oh, you didn't fight in Afghanistan. You were just in Iraq, right?
Just Iraq, 3 times.
Okay, so you're 3 terms in Iraq. You fought in Iraq, and people don't quite know how to approach you. They don't know how to deal with you. They don't know what to say, and so they start talking about football or something else.
Right.
Do you want to talk about this? In other words, we're talking about it.
Right.
And a lot of people that would never have a conversation like this are able to hear what your thoughts are. But do you want to talk about this to people, or would you rather just put this behind you and not even think about it anymore?
Not at all. When I came back from Iraq in 2003, I had that attitude. Is I went over there so that this mess doesn't have to come home. And I think that's a lot of the tension there, because if I'm sitting in a meeting and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, my anxiety starts acting up and I start sweating and my breathing goes shallow and my body temperature shoots up, and I just get, fired up. That's really what it is. It's like just before you're in combat. That's what my body does. I used to have the idea of don't bring that home because this is normal. You don't want to disrupt normal. And I went over there because I didn't want my wife, my children 10 years from now to have to feel the pangs of war. And so now I'm going to bring this home. I'm going to introduce this myself into my society. Like, I want to protect that society. That's why I went. But internally, it's literally crawling out of my skin to get out. So I realized after my tour in 2004 that I'm not doing myself or America any service by not talking about what's going on over there. And one of the biggest things is I remember driving in 2004 in Iraq, on a convoy, passing Fallujah and going to Ramadi where I was based. And we drove by Fallujah, and this is, everybody knows, 2004 Fallujah was like, might as well be Compton times 20. I mean, it was just the worst thing people could imagine in their, in middle America. And I got back to Ramadi. My guys, we sat down after we debriefed and unloaded everything, and we're sitting in the chow hall and we're eating some food, and we look up and we see on the screen, they're showing this explosion in Fallujah and saying that, talking about like there's this huge, massive firefight, but we had just driven through there, and we're like, no, that's not really what it's like. And there was this huge disconnect between what is reality over there and what is put out there to be reality in America.
But you have to understand. I mean, if you're coming from a perspective of this is what the battle is, and but from a reporter's point of view, looking at this, it might seem so much more than you that's really in it.
Right.
Maybe make the analogy of a football game. If you're the player in the trenches, you see it from a different perspective. I look at it as some guy breaks 5 tackles and makes a 95-yard touchdown run as being something that took a lot of effort, an amazing feat of strength. This guy's looking at it like, dude, no, this is what I trained to do. This is what I do.
Right.
So I mean, is that a fair analogy maybe to what you saw versus what you experienced?
Yeah, there's absolutely. That's a fair assessment. There's no way that someone who hasn't done that, and to be fair, a lot of reporters have thought that, have fought, or at least been in a combat zone. Their life was no less on the line than mine was. But when the analysis is coming from a person in a nice suit in New York, with the video footage being fed in from Fallujah on, auto camera or auto film or whatever it is, and I don't think it's any secret that the reporting in general these days is not quite up to par as far as vetting information. And so that, I guess, to return to the answer to the question, that is why I decided to say, you know what, if someone asks me, I'm going to tell them. If someone asks me a question, I will share with them, and not in a way that, because, Tom, there are plenty of guys and gals that come home and they plaster this all up. They put this on the wall and, I'm an Iraq veteran, big, huge sign on their truck, combat veteran, and there's, the way I look at it is they're dealing with things in their own way. But to me, I think, shut up, dude. Like, have a conversation. If you want to try and have people understand where you're coming from and what you seen, have a conversation with somebody, one-on-one, like we're doing. Be real about it. But a lot of people, they're not sure what they think about it because it just happens. And for 7 months, it's day by day survival. You don't have time to process what you went through. You don't have time to process, oh, that was a really close call. Or I just saw my buddy get killed. Mm-hmm. He got sent home before I even went to sleep that night. And I trained with this guy for 6 years. But tomorrow we have to wake up and we're going to go stand in front of the enemy again. I don't have time to think about how am I going to process this on an emotional level. That is not a survivalist mentality. Survivalist is, that sucks. who's shooting at me next? Who am I going to help from not dying next?
Do you miss that? And maybe this is the wrong term. Do you miss that adrenaline rush? Do you miss that excitement? I mean, because all what you're talking about, as horrific as it is,
right.
in reality, it's also got to be quite an emotional, exciting adventure.
Yeah. Missing it is not necessarily the way, but I think what I miss is I miss the teamwork. I miss the no bullshit.
Uh-huh.
It's just there's not a lot of room for all this BS that we have now, because it's just that's what I miss. I miss being a part of something
working for
bigger
something
than myself.
Yeah.
That's what I miss. I do not miss getting shot at. I do not miss having to shoot at people. I don't miss getting, awoken in the middle of the night with a mortar exploding nearby. I don't miss any of that. No way, no how. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Glad it's in my past. Would I do it again? Yes, I'd absolutely do it again. I'd probably do it differently. I'd try and do it better. But I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
It's time for somebody else.
Yeah, I'm good. It's a young man's game.
Yeah, and you're what, 30? Yeah, you're an old guy. Yeah, it's over.
But hey, 8 years in the Marines on a body, that can wear you down a little bit.
Yeah, I would imagine. So do you suffer with a lot of physical pain because of it? Do you have any injuries or just...
Oh, God. So I did. I mean, everybody goes through the musculoskeletal issues just from hiking and all that, bad back, knees, that sort of thing. I've got a couple unique injuries. I had a training accident in the pool where it crushed my nose, so I can't breathe well out of my nose. Therefore, I now have sleep apnea, so I have to sleep with the CPAP every night. I'm medicated for the anxiety disorder. I've got some asthmatic issues that they think was just from being around burning tank hulks and burning batteries and all the stuff that we burned that we considered trash. I was a scout observer, and so my eyes were very important, and they did corrective eye surgery on me, but it didn't heal properly, so I have floaters, and my vision really isn't all that great. I picked up a little bug in Iraq that is now just forever in my blood system that if it kicks up and it turns into some sort of infection, I'll be hospitalized for 2 to 3 days, and there's really only 4 antibiotics that can kill it. Known to medical science right now, and it builds up resistance to these antibiotics as you go. So, I mean, there's a slew of things that...
And you're not bitter about any of this, are you? This is just, and like you said, you do it again.
Yeah, well, and the VA takes care of it. I know there's a really bad, the VA, VA backlog, and that's all we're hearing about.
Yeah.
Okay, well, part of that is the VA is not designed to do this. It wasn't originally designed, years ago to do this. So they're like a center trying to turn themselves into running back right now, right? To go back to the football analogies. Yeah. It's just not in their DNA. But they're trying, and they're doing a good job, especially here in Omaha. They're doing a fantastic job. But they're taking care of me. So, and I don't ask for any prolonged, existence or so. I'm 60% disabled from the VA. They cut me a check every month for like $1,000. I'd be just as soon, I'd be happy to give that back to them and just say, look, I don't really care about the money. Just, let's get this anxiety thing under control. Let's, if I've got something going on with my lungs or whatever it is, related to what happened, can you help me out? That's really all I care about.
You talk about the anxiety. Do you have any, survivor's guilt? I've heard of this. People that, have been involved in a tragic accident, and they live and the others die, their friends die.
Yeah.
You talk about losing friends in battle. Do you have survivor's guilt?
I did for a long time. I worked through that, actually. And I think that was a big piece of what my anxiety was built around, because when I talked before, we didn't really have time to process what happened. Well, in Iraq in 2004, April 9th, 2004, I had a Marine, Chance Phelps, who I trained this guy. So from the day he set foot in the Marine Corps, we call it the Fleet Marine Corps. So you're done with your boot camp and all that job training, and now you're with your unit in the Marines. From that day till the day he died, I trained him. He was my Marine. I was a squad leader. And in Iraq, he was supposed to have, we had a 42-man platoon doing missions from convoy operations, vehicle patrols around the camp, quick reaction force to any type of attack on the camp, foot patrols around the camp, a whole number of activities that we were required to do. So what we did is we took one guy each day and said, okay, today's your day off. So you got a day off every 42 days. And that was his day off. And so I took a whole bunch of Marines over. We did this thing called, it's a logistics run. You just go get fuel for the camp and all that kind of stuff. And I came back and he was gone. And half of the guys were still there. And so when I left for my logistics run, half of the guys were still there. So when I came back, they were all gone. And I asked Staff Sergeant Munoz at the time, our platoon sergeant, I said, well, where'd he go? Where'd they go? Oh, well, the general had to go somewhere. He needed a convoy, so he signed up. This Chance Phelps ended up getting killed. They got the most complex ambush at the time that they'd had. That was the first time that pulled the rug out from underneath me, because when you train a Marine, before we went over there, I was like, look, guys, you're ready to go. Everything you can do to train, you've done. Now, if someone gets killed, that's war. Mm-hmm. You could do everything right and still get killed. There's no bullet out there with your name on it. There's no fatalistic, it's just the chaos of war. But I had never considered the fact that one of my Marines would get killed without me being there to just, what if I could have done something? What would I have done differently? Like that whole thing, and at the time I had a whole, 11 other Marines that I was in charge of. This 12th Marine got killed. And so these guys do need to grieve at some level, because what you don't want is then to go outside the wire the next day and they have some vendetta against the world because their best friend just got killed. So it's like, all right, let's sit down. Let's talk about this. You need to grieve, cry, do what you need to do. But then I need to redirect these guys back into the mission, because we still have a long way to go before we go home. And I never took the time to grieve, and I never considered the fact that would happen, is to lose one of my Marines without being there. So I dealt with that for a long time. I played cat and mouse with his folks. They live out in Wyoming, Du Bois, Wyoming, for a long time. And just 2 years ago, I went out there for the first time to see his grave site and to hang out with his family. And I brought my wife and my mom and my sister and my sister's fiance at the time with us. And that was a really weird thing, because so Tom, here's what happened. When I told you about 2006 when I moved to San Diego, and I worked part of the time, and then
civilian the part of the time. Yeah.
So I actually started to, in a way, form two personalities. I had the Marine Ben, and I had the non-Marine, trying to be everything but Marine Ben. And this happens to most Marines, I think, or soldiers, because you go and you serve your time, wherever you're based, and then you come home on leave for a week or two, and you can't be this, gung-ho. Yeah. You got to come home and talk with your mom and dad, and your friends, and you
can't use the same language you're using with the other Marines back out overseas. Right.
Yeah. So everybody has kind of this. You have these two sides to you. Uh-huh. Well, what happened was, as this anxiety grew, and there's, you can lace this with all the survivor's guilt, which is true. But it became harder and harder now, because I'm trying to figure out which person I'm supposed to be in which scenario. And when I went out to visit Chance's grave, they ended up making a movie about this called Taking Chance with Kevin Bacon, and it was about him being escorted home. But when I went home went out to Wyoming to visit Chance's grave, all my family came with me, and I was stressed about this, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to face something that I've had buried deep inside me for 8 years now, and I don't know how I'm going to react to facing this. This is a big enough thing in itself. Let's go ahead and compound that by bringing my wife and my mother and my sister and all.
And they want to help, but they don't know what to say to you.
They don't know.
They can't relate to this.
They don't know what's going to happen.
So they're
They don't know. I mean, and so the way I look at it, I think of it as almost like it's going to be two atoms colliding, in this big... And you know what happened, Tom? Nothing. Nothing happened. Went up there, had a great time, grieved, my family interacted well. They want to know. They really just were at a point. If Ben says something or shares something, then we can share something. It was so cool because Chance's mom, Gretchen, and his stepdad, and he had a father and a stepdad, they're all there, and they knew him for 18 years. But they didn't know him the last year and a half. I did.
Yeah.
And so we're piecing together, I'm piecing this man together for her, of her son that she never knew. And she's piecing together this man to me that I never got a chance to know at that level. And on the drive home, it's like a 12-hour drive, And on the drive home, I'm sitting here going, it's that term, cognitive dissonance. What you think to be true has now been proven to be wrong or different than what you thought. And so now I'm like, all right, two atoms were supposed to collide and it was going to be this big atomic explosion, but nothing happened. They actually just started moving in the same direction together.
Was that a relief or a disappointment for you?
This is a huge relief because I'm sitting here going, what am I doing? What am I afraid of? I'm afraid to just exist happily. Is that it? Do I think that there's some, that this Marine Ben and civilian Ben can't be one? And so, so that was creating a lot of my anxiety because I describe it as, if you have a piece of paper, you can look at one side of the piece of paper and that's Marine Ben, and then the other side of the piece of paper is non-Marine Ben. And so I have to figure out, who knows what about me on which side of this, And then you realize that that's not it at all. I'm one person on one continuous life timeline from day zero that I was born until now. And people know me as pre-Marine Ben, during Marine Ben, post-Marine Ben, all of these. But for me, the most healing therapeutic part of that was to recognize, no, one life, one existence, a whole lot of experience in those 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's when you go.
But I'm looking at this like, okay, like in my life, okay? Yeah. I've got friends that I had in college, and they see a side of me which is different than the side that my sister sees of me, right, which is different than the side that my mom saw in me, which is different than the side that my boss sees in me.
Right.
So it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? Although I didn't have the traumatic, maybe the war experience that you had, but it's the same sort of thing. Maybe yours is just sort of exaggerated because of the war experience?
Maybe not. Maybe that's a lesson for all of us.
Am I just trying to oversimplify this?
I think you're right on. That's another thing. Like when I talk with the veterans who are really struggling with post-traumatic stress, and I'm like, the one thing I always come from a place of, you're not special. You're not special or unique in that you deal with these questions. Everybody deals with these. Soldiers and non-soldiers alike deal with these questions. But for whatever reason, the way that we're afflicted by these questions, or I'm afflicted by these questions, I've been more introspective about how to get over it because at some point it stopped my ability to exist in a way. I was near suicidal. So I had to find a way to make it work.
I always found it interesting, coming from the Vietnam era. Being raised in the Vietnam era, but I didn't serve in Vietnam. I always found it interesting how some soldiers came back and wound up having such great, productive, successful lives from their experience, and others came back and wound up being emotional cripples. Mm-hmm. They couldn't assimilate into society. They dealt with anger issues. They felt like they couldn't. They couldn't belong. I mean, it was a whole different attitude. But of course, Vietnam was a whole different war than what we're seeing in the Middle East right now. And the media doesn't cover it too much about the soldiers coming back. I mean, you come back from Iraq, and nobody really knows.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, we're still going to be fighting, and there's no big parade, there's no victory, there's nothing that says, wow, look what we did, we won, like there was like in World War II or something like that. Are there a number of soldiers that the media is not covering and that people don't know about? Are there a number of soldiers that are just, again, using the word emotional cripple? You've got issues that you're dealing with and that you're going through. But are there a number of soldiers that are at the VA or maybe just out on the street, homeless and that can't quite cope and can't get back into the real world?
Yep. Simply, yes. We call them the ones in their mom's basement.
Uh-huh.
You know, when we talk about, there's so many people that are trying to do good things for veterans and they know that this is an issue. But the problem is that the majority of the ones who need the most help are the ones who won't self-identify. They won't raise their hand and say, oh my goodness, I'm having these issues, I need help. They'll just sit and waste away. They'll sit in their mother's basement, you know, with their bronze star or purple heart, you know, in a box in the corner and play Medal of Honor video game, you know, or combat video game, and medicate themselves with booze or drugs and eventually waste away. And
why do you think you were able to overcome that and others don't?
I guess maybe just the way I was raised. I don't know. I don't know why. And I'm okay with not being perfect. I'm okay with that. And I recognize that I won't be. And so whatever my failures or shortcomings may be as a man, as a person, I'm okay with that. But I'm not going to just accept that this is just how it is. Because I believe that every day, you know, there's a phrase that do what you can with what you have where you are. And you just take where you're at and just take one step. And the next day take another step. And because what's the alternative? Sitting in my mom's basement? I mean, that's not life. And I was to the point suicidal at one point where I was sitting on a beach in San Diego, and I'm looking out at the water, and I'm just thinking, this is too much. All this stuff, I don't know what to do or how to deal with it. It's too much. And I just had this, you know, call it a come to Jesus moment or a divine intervention of sense. But the phrase that kept running through my head was, well, that's just not in you. It's just not in me to, you know, to take the easy way out anymore. And so from that moment, I turned around and, you know, you have the whole ocean spread out in front of you, and this bay, it almost comes like 270 degrees on, you know, from behind me to either side. And so you literally feel surrounded by America because you're on the edge of America, you know,
right,
surrounded by civilization, this American society. And I just had a moment where I realized it's just not in you. And once you realize that, it's not in me to end this, then I guess there's really not a whole lot more to do than get going. You know, that Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. You know?
Because, indeed, you might have been physically alive, but if you're staying in your mom's basement, it's a form of suicide.
Yeah. It's the ultimate waste, you know? And so, and sometimes that just takes time. Sometimes those men and women just need time to
everybody. So you came through it on your own time.
Right.
The guys in their mom's basement right now will hopefully come through it on their own time. Yeah.
You know, but you talk about the Vietnam folks coming back from Vietnam, and I firmly believe that it's because of their experience and sacrifice coming home from an unpopular war that Iraq and Afghanistan veterans now are treated with the level of respect and care that they are in society. Because I don't know if most people know this, but there is a general disconnect between veterans of OIF, OEF, Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom, and veterans of Vietnam, Korea even, potentially Gulf War One, and even back to World War II, because I think a lot of them see us as crybabies. Because they're going, hey, we didn't have this.
Uh-huh.
We came home, we got to work. And maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe part of the problem is we assume that there's going to be something wrong with you. You know, you come home from Iraq, man, I'll bet that guy's seen some things. You know, he probably needs lots of help and treatment and counseling. And then I start going, well, yeah, I do. I could use some of that. And now I'm so introspective, and I'm digging in so deep. Like I may be unearthing demons from when I was 6 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we're just have this huge assumption that needs to be done. And the same thing could have happened in Vietnam and World War II and Korea and with all these guys, but they didn't have that option. It's, look, you come home and you go get a paycheck to feed your face, you know, and you better get to work. And now we expect you to come home and work. So work. And so now it's almost, who knows, maybe this coddling culture is perpetuating.
Now, I've talked to like World War II and Korean vets and even some Vietnam vets who like belong to like the American Legion.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about how you guys don't join groups like theirs. Is that because you say there's this disconnect, you don't feel welcome? Or is that with that group, you don't feel connected with that group? Or is it more along the lines of you saying, okay, yeah, that was then, this is now, and move on?
I think there's a few different reasons behind it. You're right on for a couple of those. Either not feeling welcome, or this is the old guard. You know, this is what they did when they came home, because those places was their VA clinic. You know, the American Legion and the VFW, that was where they got their therapy.
They'd sit around, have a few beers, talk about the war, and then go home.
And then go home. You know, that was their therapy. Whereas now we have all these resources and stuff, and so the VFW to us is more of a lot of us. It seems more like a novelty of yesteryear. I think a lot of us find ourselves going, what's the point? We get all our therapy over here, and now I'm trying to assimilate into this culture.
Uh-huh.
So what's the point of going? Whereas to them, they're like, this was our lifeblood. This is what kept us sane.
My dad was a World War II vet, and as a kid, I remember going to all the Legion Hall. My dad's a past commander of American Legion Post 1 and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember, you know, every Memorial Day was a big day in our family, because we'd go to Soldiers' Graves, and we'd go down to the club, and Dad and everybody have a few beers, we'd have pop and, you know, play a little pinball or whatever. But it was always a big day for me.
Right.
But you're right, I never thought of it. I always just thought of it as part of a club that my dad belonged to, as opposed to a club where he was hanging out with other people that could associate with what he went through. Because my dad was very proud of his military service in World War II, but it wasn't until he was like almost death that I got to find out some things about what he did. And in reality, he saw some pretty bad stuff, and I didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but we didn't talk about it. You know, he never brought it up, and any time that, even towards the end when we did talk a little bit, I always felt awkward talking to him about it. I don't feel awkward talking to you about what you've seen, what you've experienced, but when it's your dad, I couldn't make that same connection. So do you have the same thing like with your family? In other words, is it easier you telling me and the people listening to, you know, the podcast what you went through than it might be talking to your dad or your mom or even your wife about things like this?
I don't feel like it's any easier or harder in one way or the other. I think at this point I'm desensitized to the conversation, and that's part of it. That was kind of my own personal cognitive behavioral therapy. The more times that you talk through these instances and try and, because if I'm talking to you, Tom, and to your listeners, then I have to communicate it properly, I have to try and see it from your perspective. I have to try and bridge this gap between my view of it and my experiences with it and your view of it and your concept of what that's like. And every time I do that, you bridge that gap, and it gets me closer to seeing things the way I used to, or maybe a more healthy way of seeing things than just being caught up inside the combat side of it. If that makes any sense, I don't know. But going back to your dad and having the conversations with your dad, and so think about that. These guys who came home, World War II, men and women, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and either nobody cared to ask, or they had that same thought that I did. I fought the war over there to leave the war over there. And I'm coming home, and son, you asked me about the war, you don't even want to know. I will not invite that horrible part of what mankind is capable of into this house. I'm not going to invite it into this house. I'm not going to invite it into your head, the things that I went through and saw and did. And I want to protect you from that. And I want to protect me from that. Because for crying out loud, let's let sleeping dogs lie now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have these guys coming home like me, where we might as well be shouting it from the rooftops. They probably see it as we're like the Westboro Baptist Church of veterans, because we come home and we're not going to take it lying down. VA, you're going to do, you're going to, get us our disability checks, and you're going to, and it's like these guys are going, really?
Yeah.
I mean, that might be some of it. Why we're not connecting, I don't know. It's a shame. I try really hard to talk with the Vietnam veteran, because it's funny. I had a conversation at the Marine Corps League a while ago, and I was sitting down talking with a guy who was a rat. I forget what they call them, like the rat hole guys in Vietnam. They go in, here's a pistol, a flashlight, and a couple grenades. Go down in there and clean out that rat hole, And he's talking to me about military operations in urban terrain with, in Iraq, fighting in Ramadi and Fallujah and that kind of stuff. And he's going, man, I don't know how you guys do it. I don't know how you do it. It's unbelievable. I could never do that. And I'm going, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I don't know how you did that. How do you live in the jungle? And among all that, your body is rotting in the jungle every day, and you're going in and fighting this enemy who exists and lives in that. And I'm like, I don't know how you did that. And now because of that, we're like, we don't know how either of us did that. But you know what? You're awesome. Let's hang out, because we're clearly cut of the same cloth. And that's where you find those common bonds, and that the warrior culture, that's so important to be connected to this American warrior culture of all those people who came before us and laid the groundwork. Because I firmly believe it is only because of these guys who went to Vietnam, they got involuntarily plucked out of their lives. Their government said, your life is worth what we say it's worth. I'm going to send you over here. You're going to fight a war that you may or may not believe in. I don't really care. But you're going to probably fight, because you're also not going to just sit there and willingly die. And then we're going to bring you home. The American public's going to spit on you, and then we're going to forget that it ever happened, because we're so ashamed that we were ever involved in this war. We're going to wash our hands of anything that's associated with it. Mm-hmm. And what I somehow have something to complain about?
Yeah.
I signed on the dotted line.
Yeah.
I went over there, and now I come home, and I'm getting taken care of if I ask for help.
Yeah.
It's because of them that a guy like me is able to walk down the street and someone can't just instantly identify me as having gone to war. It's because of their sacrifice and what they went through.
People listening right now, we've got probably, as I envision this, two people. We've got people listening right now that are soldiers that fought over there or have family members that fought over there, and others that maybe are just interested in the military or something along those lines. What would you say to the people that are listening that were soldiers or whose family members were soldiers over there? What do you want them to know about your experience, and what do you think they could benefit from your experience?
Going to war is profound. And the profound, not in the very magical sense that the word is used. It's just it's an absolute turning point in your life. So people who have experienced that have to somehow find a way of pivoting back, or I don't know. Have the conversation if people are willing to. Ask questions. Don't shy away from it. And that's on both sides of the table. Veterans and family members of veterans. And, there's really not... There's no simple answer to it. Because every single person who goes to war has a different experience. I could be standing right next to somebody who went through every single fight that I went through, and they had a completely different experience than I did. And so...
Did they really, though? It's like the Vietnam vet you're talking about, okay? Yeah, his experience and your experience were completely different, yet deep down inside it was the same thing.
The fear is the same.
Yeah.
When you that level of fear.
Are you a brave man?
No. I am a man of principle. And because of that, those principles push me to do certain things that some people may consider brave. So, signing up to join the Marine Corps. Wow, that was really brave of you to go do that right after 9/11. Yeah, but it wasn't bravery that did it. I didn't have a cape flapping in the wind as I signed my, I just had a foundation principle that said, not on my watch. If there's and I don't know if I made any impact, but if there was anything I could do, I'm going to try. And that's what it comes down to. It's the try. I'm going to try to assimilate back into society. I'm going to try to communicate with people and tell them what this whole post-traumatic stress thing is all about. I'm going to try to bridge the gap between my generation and the generation before me who has gone through a similar experience. I'm going to try to make my world that I live in better than the world that my son lives in or my daughter lives in. I'm going to try. And I'm going to fail. But I'm going to try.
Thanks for listening to this interview on TomBecka.com, where everyone's extraordinary, everyone has a story to tell. If you enjoyed this interview, would you do me two favors. Favor number one, would you share with somebody else? Would you pass it on? Would you let other people know about TomBecka.com? We've got a great community here of interesting people with different stories and a little slice of Americana. So please spread the word on TomBecka.com. And if you really liked it, could you buy me a beer? Could you buy me a sandwich? Could you do something to help keep this podcast alive and make a donation on the front page? Either way, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate you being a part of this community here on TomBecka.com.